Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our FSR online debate. The topic that we will be discussing today is electricity self-consumption for the energy transition. So we're going to discuss a lot about the role of electricity, of course, in the energy transition that we know will be an important pillar in achieving the climate targets, but we're going to focus more specifically on prosumption. And it's not my field of expertise, but I have the pleasure of introducing this topic to you with several speakers today. But more importantly, we will have the leadership of my colleague Alberto Potocznik, whom I'm giving the floor for the first introduction.
Thank you, Laria, and good afternoon to all of you joining us today for this FSR debate. Yesterday, indeed, we are talking about electricity self-consumption. We all know that the energy transitions to achieve carbon neutrality or climate neutrality by 2050 involves a greater penetration of renewables in final energy consumption. The electricity sector traditionally has contributed more than proportionally to the common effort, and we expect that renewables may cover around, or may be required to cover more than 70% of final electricity consumption by 2030. This will be achieved by large renewable installations, for example, large offshore wind parks, but also we expect that a significant contribution will be provided by decentralized installations. So those, including those of end consumers and in end consumers' premises. Therefore, consumers become sort of prosumers, and they enter into self-consumption. Now, the current framework provides some specific rights and obligation to prosumers as active consumers, and in fact, I refer particularly to Article 15 of the Electricity Directive. And there are very different forms of prosumption, ranging from the individual households to collective prosumers in one building, from small and medium enterprises to public institutions to energy communities. So there is a wide range of potentials for developing prosumptions in Europe. And there seems to be enormous potentials for electricity production from prosumers, mostly based on renewable energies. There are some estimates that suggest that they could by itself almost fail to meet the target, or at least exceed 60% by 2050 in final electricity consumption. So there is a huge potential, but also there are barriers. And there have been, I think, several studies looking at potential barrier of regulatory barriers, financial barriers, technical barriers, social barriers, and also lack of knowledge and experience. So against this background, this debate will look at the potential for prosumption, at the forms of prosumptions, identified what are the main benefits, but also what are the main barriers and how to overcome them. As Ilaria said, we have a very distinguished set of speakers. We have two opening presentations. The first one from Adela Tesarova, the head of unit for consumers, local initiatives, and just transition at DG Energy, European Commission, and then Javier Esparrago, expert in the energy environment team at the European Environmental Agency. But before, and then we have a panel that will be moderated and introduced by Ilaria. But before we move to that, we thought, and this is an experiment that we do for the first time, to actually run the polls already at this stage, and then later on. The same questions would be asked to the audience at this stage, and then later on, and then we'll see whether the discussion that we are having today will somehow steer or influence or change the attitude of the participants in today's debate. So I would ask now Ghazi, my colleague, to launch the first poll. Exactly. Thank you very much. And then here you're asked what role, in your views, will self-consumption or prosumptions play in the energy transition towards a decarbonized energy sector? You choose A if you think that it would be a game-changing role, B if you think that it would be an important role, C if you think that would be one of many developments, so no special thing, and D if you have no views. So please vote. Still a few seconds. Okay. Yes, do we have? Okay, so important, not game-changing, but important nonetheless. That's I think is interesting feedback. Okay, then the second poll is about the benefits, and self-consumptions and prosumption is actually credited with significant delivering benefits in many areas. In your views, which is the most important area in which prosumption or self-consumption could deliver benefits? Is it environmental benefits, the possibility of greater penetration of renewable sources, possibly with limited impact on land use? Enhance security of supply, because this will be produced domestically and therefore reduce our reliance on imported energy. Social benefits, greater public acceptance, local job creations, etc. Financial benefits, well, lower energy bills, and on the other hand, the possibility of selling any excess energy onto the market, or you have no specific views. Wow, okay, it seems that we have a fairly diverse feedback as to what are the main benefits. If I'm not mistaken, financial benefits is slightly higher than anything else, but that's we'll see later on in the debate. And then the last poll is we're talking about now the barriers to the development of prosumptions. What is the main type of barrier hampering the development of self-consumption or prosumption in Europe? A is regulatory barriers, B is financial barriers, so the need to have significant funds for significant upfront investment. C is technical barriers, lack of infrastructure, for example, to transport the energy produced, or limited capacity of the existing meters. D is social barriers, the fact that you need dedicated effort at the level of the community. And E is a lack of knowledge and expertise to develop prosumptions, again, mostly in the context of energy community. F, if you have no views. Oh, that's interesting. There seems to be quite a important majority having to do with regulatory barriers, which, you know, in a sense is why we're here. You know, we deal mainly with regulatory aspects. So I think this was very important indeed. And welcome, Adela. I see that you have joined. So now we go straight into the first two opening presentation. As I mentioned, the first one is Adela Tesarova, Head of Unit Consumers, Local Initiative Just Transition at the Directorate General for Energy. Adela, the screen is yours. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And many thanks to you, Alberto, and to you, Ilaria, for the invitation. Do you want me to show the slides, or because I have sent them? Do you want me to show them, yeah?
Please, yes, indeed.
Okay, I will share the screen then. I'm sorry, I'm gonna share the screen now. This one, okay.
Yep.
So I think you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we do. Not yet
Very
in
good.
presentation mode, but we see.
It's now in presentation mode, right?
Okay, and coming perhaps. Not yet, but it doesn't matter. We can see it properly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know how to do it differently.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, let's go. So briefly on the concept. So why we think this type of self-consumption schemes are important, because the energy system of the future will be very different compared to now. We expect that it's going to be very quickly decarbonized, will be integrated, will be much more decentralized with a central role for consumers. It will be digitalized, and we also believe that the future energy system will be liberalized and competitive. We can, of course, discuss, but I think that's not the point of the seminar today. But that's at least the ambition of the Commission, of the European Commission, to see the energy system of the future like this. Second, consumer empowerment or active role of consumers in this new energy system. Why is it good?
Adela, sorry,
yes?
I think at least I'm still seeing your cover slide. I don't know whether you moved. I heard it clicking.
I have moved them, yes.
Alberto, I could share them, please.
Okay.
I think it will be better.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry for that.
No problem.
I have stopped sharing my screen. Sorry for that.
No problem. No problem at all.
So can we move to next slide? Yeah. Okay, so that's the energy system of the future. Can we please move to the next slide? So why is it good to activate consumers so that they can actively participate in the energy system? First, accessing directly renewables can mean more affordable energy for consumers. It makes consumers active actors in the transition, in the green energy transition, which can speed up the green energy transition. Engaging consumers, of course, means also speeding up deployment of renewables, because when consumers get engaged, they get engaged on renewables. Consumers are not going to be producing nuclear energy. So it means more renewables in the system. It can also increase public acceptance for concrete projects, because when people can get financially involved, or they can directly benefit from a wind farm which is built near their village, they might be more open to the idea of building this wind farm. It also mobilizes private capital, because it's a nice way for people to invest in something green and make money on it. And also this can help increase flexibility in the market, because if consumers self-produce and they also have smart meters and they have batteries, they can also help stabilizing the demand and supply in the network. So many benefits potentially. Next slide. As Alberto said, there are different ways of involving consumers. We talk about self-consumption, either individual self-consumption. Can we go still back? One slide back, please. Yes, so individual self-consumption, this is when people put solar panels on their rooftop and they self-produce, self-consume. Maybe they can share with a neighbor. They can also store energy if they have batteries. Then the second case is a collective self-consumption scheme in a multi-apartment building. That is an option which is also very useful, because people who live in a multi-apartment building can install solar panels on the roof, and they can share the energy between themselves, and they can also store it if they have some batteries. Another example, a very nice example, are energy communities. Energy communities is people coming together in the form of it's a legal personality, an energy community. And energy community also have other objectives than just producing, storing, supplying energy. It can be social or environmental benefits. So energy communities is a nice way how to bring people together, which can have other benefits than just to produce energy. It can improve social cohesion in an area. And it's a nice way how to promote good relations also, and also some entrepreneurial opportunities. If, for example, we have an area with a lot of unemployment, this is a nice way how to generate employment and also renewable energy. Next slide, please. When it comes to energy communities, we have, and when it comes to the legal framework that we have at EU level, so the Renewable Energy Directive and the Electricity Directive govern the Institute of Energy Communities, where we set out the rules and the differences between these two concepts, while the Renewable Energy Community concept which is established in the Renewable Electricity Directive is an energy community where which acts in a proximity, meaning that the members are all based in the same area. There is a geographic proximity, and it is specific for small businesses. We lost the slide now. The second concept, citizens energy community, which exists in the electricity directive, then it's maybe kind of a next stage where the participating citizens don't have to be located in the same area. So we no longer have the condition of geographic proximity. So it's, let's say, it's an energy community that is growing. And for both concepts, we have this objective that they provide environmental, economic, and social benefits. And the participants have full ownership over the production assets. Yeah. And then we have the concept of self-consumption, collective self-consumption in multi-apartment buildings, which exists in the Electricity Directive. And in this case, there is no legal personality, and the inhabitants of this multi-apartment building can also lease or rent the assets. They don't have to be owners of the assets, and they don't have to enter into legal personality to be able to share this type of energy. In the Electricity Directive, we currently don't cover any other types of energy sharing. So only those in the form of energy communities or collective self-consumption in a multi-apartment building. Next screen, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So this is how it works in practice with an energy community where people join the energy community and become members of this legal entity, which is scenario 1. And scenario 2 is when people invest, rent, or lease renewable energy assets, or receive a service of this kind. So that would be energy sharing, which is not a form of an energy community. And in any of these two cases, the consumer receives then renewable energy as a result of this engagement in some form of energy sharing. Next slide, please. Yes, this, of course, is there are also some risks related to these activities or potentially problems. We often hear about the risk of local congestion at low voltage level or at distribution level, which happens because we are adding a lot of renewables at distribution level, and the network might not be ready to deal with it. That's, of course, one of the risks, but that's a risk related to the fact that we want to have a lot of renewables in the system. The second is, yes, that if we leave it up to consumers to install renewables, we might end up with suboptimal distribution of renewable technologies. That's true as well. And of course, energy sharing at local level may increase costs for those who are not participating in such schemes. That would be in a case when the distribution system operator has to invest into the distribution network to be able to cope with the renewables that are added, and hence the other consumers or everyone receives higher distribution charges. That's true. Next slide, please. What do we do to deal with these risks? So one option is to expose consumers to dynamic prices or time of use prices, which means that they are awarded or distributed or time of not only prices but also network tariffs. So then the prosumer is rewarded for not injecting to the network at peak times when there is already a lot of renewables. So in this case, the most likely, because of course renewables are produced at the same time. So for example, on a sunny day, everyone who produces renewables and is not at home to use them is injecting back to the network. So with time of use differentiated tariffs, network tariffs, there is an incentive for people not to do it. And how can they avoid doing it? either they need to set up the processes at home in a way so that they have more consumption at the time when they produce, or they need to have a storage. They need to have a battery. That's one way of how to deal with it. The other way is to help consumers participate in flexibility markets through aggregators, for example, and therefore group these consumers so that again we avoid that they are sending capacity to the network when we don't need it. How do we deal with the social costs related to these initiatives? We need to make them open also to low-income consumers so that they not only bear the additional network costs related to connecting these new entities, but they can also benefit themselves from the cheaper renewables that are generated through the renewable electricity if they can be part, for example, of an energy community. Next slide. And I'm coming to an end, where I would like to say that we have a very strong objectives at EU level to facilitate and to encourage this type of consumer involvement. They come from Repower EU. And there we have put some objectives, such as to have at least one renewable-based energy community in every municipality of certain size by 2025. And then through the Energy Performance on Buildings Directive, we have the objective, or we will have an obligation if this passes a legislative process, to have mandatory installation of rooftop solar for all public buildings, but also for new residential buildings. And the proposed dates you can see on the slide. The Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is still in negotiations. To make it easier to set up new energy communities, the Commission also committed to set up next year Energy Communities Facility, which will be a small-scale financing, which will be available to projects set up new energy communities. Next slide, please. What do we do in a very short term? We have two projects in DG Energy, which we are running these days. This is Energy Communities Repository, which is an initiative helping us to map regulatory barriers and other types of barriers that currently exist and are slowing down the deployment of energy communities. And then we have also a so-called advisory hub for rural energy communities with the objective to provide technical assistance and help people set up energy communities in rural areas. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions and to the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adela. I think it's a very comprehensive presentation. And I mean, as you will see, well, as we've seen, there is a perception that many of the barriers are of a regulatory nature. So an intervention by the Commission to try to streamline the process and the permitting for self-consumption maybe is one of the key elements for pushing self-consumption and prosumptions forward. But we'll see later on in the discussion. Next is Javier Asparago, an expert in at the European Environment Agency in the Energy and Environment team. So Javier, the screen is yours for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Alberto, for the introduction, and thank you, Ilaria, for organizing both of you this event. So let me share my screen. I hope it works fine. There you go.
Yes.
Okay. So I will start just with a quick word about the European Environment Agency. For those of you who do not know us, so we are an independent agency of the European Union. We're based in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and our membership includes all, well, of course, all the EU member states, plus Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Turkey, and also the Western Balkan countries as cooperating countries. And in what we do, in general, we inform on policy implementation. We assess some of the systemic challenges affecting the environment in Europe and support countries through the co-creation, sharing, and use of knowledge. And we cover all sort of environmental topics, from noise to air quality, biodiversity, and of course, climate change and energy. More specifically on prosumers, we have been working on this topic for the last few years. We had two main products. We had this main report, Energy Prosumers in Europe, which came out a few months ago, and then also a smaller paper on focus on cities. And when we started this work, one of the main goals, or one of the first tasks that we took, was to define what's a prosumer, or what's the scope that we're considering here. So Adela already introduced the different categorizations that there are in the European legislation. We took a slightly different approach so in the end we settled for a quite wide term that will cover all the entities representing citizens, can be from household to small and medium enterprise, a public institution, etc., which are active in the energy system. The most obvious example is producing their own renewable energy, but also offering energy services such as demand flexibility and storage, as well as Adela introduced before, or by being involved in an energy community. So they might not be generating themselves, but they are subscribed to a community or that invests on renewable energy, or even by owning and operating a grid infrastructure, which is still quite niche, but it might grow. So we take a relatively wide term here. And then we categorize the prosumers models in four main categories. I mean, when it comes to prosumers, that there is as many models as prosumers there are. It's really varied, and it's really you have all sorts of types, but the most immediate ones are in individual households. So they can also, just the classic example, someone putting solar panels on the rooftop. It can be SMEs and public institutions. They can be connected between them, but they can also be just connected to the grid directly. And then collective prosumers, which can be neighbors in a building, or it can be energy communities and cooperatives that they might also, they might live in the same place or nearby, or they might also be scattered all across the country or a region. And this is just for us to categorize in the main types of prosumers. Then there are many different terms. We talk about prosumers or self-consumption or distributed generation. They are largely interchangeable, although, as we say, we settle for the term prosumers just because it's the broadest. And one of the things we tried as well to do was to quantify how many prosumers are there in Europe, and the answer is that we do not know. The best we could get together with, we were working together with C Delft and the Fraunhofer Institute, was some estimations based on 2015 data, but they're quite uncertain. There is now increasingly better information and statistics on distributed generation, but we don't really know how many energy communities are in Europe. We don't know how many members they have. We don't know how many individuals off grid they are. So there is a bit of a lack of data. The same or similar case comes when we talk about potential. There is a study from the JRC, it's not this one, but they estimate that up to a quarter could be covered by rooftop solar alone. There's also another study, this from our colleagues from C Delft, that they did it based on different countries and different technologies, and in some cases it can go up to 70% of the electricity needs of a country by 2050. However, it is important to note that we're talking here about technical potential. It doesn't mean that it is economically feasible or even desirable to cover every single surface in a city with solar panels. And this is important as well on the debate that is emerging recently about where to put the renewables. We'll talk about this a bit later. So the potential is huge, but it is not always clear what is the difference, the limit between the technical potential and really the achievable potential of prosumers. When we come to the benefits, this slide we have a lot of text, but I would like more you to focus on the colors. So we talk about different categories: individual prosumers, collective prosumers, and also SMEs and public organizations. And there are different benefits depending on the model that we are talking about. So looking at environmental benefits, of course, all of them, as long as they're renewables, they help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But when it comes to land reduction, not all of them necessarily bring the same level of benefits. individual prosumers very often use the rooftop of their own house. They're not using additional land, but then some collective prosumers, for example, they might pull up there and make an investment into a larger plant, or the same with some institutions, and this would lead to land use. So it changes. The other way around, when it comes to social benefits, it's energy communities and energy cooperatives, the one who bring a better sense of community, and the ones that can make an easier fairness of the distribution of the benefits. Because, well, let's be honest, installing panels in your house is expensive. Not everyone can afford the capital investment that it takes, and also not everyone owns a roof to put the solar panels on top of it. So then they might be it might be an easier entrance through collective prosumers, such as communities, where sometimes it's initial fee of €100, or it can be as easy as changing your electricity provider. Adele also introduced before some other possibilities for individual prosumers to be part of the energy sharing, and these are all very interesting developments as well. And the same goes as well for the financial benefits that they're not always distributed equally among the members. And when it comes to barriers, we see a similar picture. They are not the same barriers that all of them face. For example, we observe that in general, of course, changes a lot by countries, but in general in Europe, the regulation for individual prosumers is better developed than for collective prosumers. And we see this in some countries. For example, in Poland, there have been a huge increase in prosumers in self-generation from individuals over the last few years. However, the collective prosumption is very much in its infancy. There is very few, if any, energy communities and cooperatives. Other countries, on the contrary, that have a longer tradition of energy cooperatives, like in Denmark, you can see how they're more better developed. So then the different regulatory and legislative barriers depending on them, and also financial financial barriers too. Here then, after looking at these benefits and barriers, we're starting to look at, well, benefits compared to what? And the debate on whether renewables versus fossil fuels is quite well established. However, now the debate is focusing a bit more on whether prosumers are the alternative to those larger scale renewable plants in the countryside, for example. And here, well, we see an increasing sort of like a NIMBY approach of people say that, well, renewables are very good, but I do not want to have my mountains covered in windmills, or I do not want to have the countryside turn into a sea of solar panels. And there is a growing debate as well on the environmental impacts of renewables beyond climate change. And here, very much agree with what Adela mentioned before, that the future energy system will be a mix of prosumers and a large-scale system, and it will be more decentralized, and it will also be sort of like integrated through a smart grid. But prosumers are not the silver bullet that will solve all these problems, because, we want it or not, small plants are usually less cost efficient per unit of energy due to economy of scales. They're more efficient than the large ones, and also they can find better locations. So if you have a house, you have the location and the roof that your house has. You cannot choose another location, but large plants, they can find locations where the soil is cheaper, or where the light is better, or where there's more wind, and so on. Then it's also true that the existing policies and regulation are optimized for the current energy system, which is a centralized system. It's a system based on a large plant who distribute it. So then the same applies for renewables. The system, both technical and regulatory, is better suited for a large plant that distributes. So here, like the grid fees and taxes, so on, and in these changes, such as ones that were mentioned before. And then there's also the issue that at the moment, the way the system is set up, the increased presumption can create also problems for grid operators, governments, and even to non-prosumers, because at the end, we'll get to the debate of who pays for the grid. If I'm consuming my own energy, then who pays for the grid that is also necessary for those who don't consume their own energy? So yeah, So then this is something that definitely needs to be advanced, both from a technical and from a regulatory perspective. And well, in recent months, or well, already a year, we come to the energy crisis as well, that prosumers have been very much flagged as a potential solution to the energy crisis that we're living in Europe. It has some benefits for sure. It protects consumers against some price fluctuations. It improves the energy supply, both for individual consumers, but also at EU level. The more energy we produce, the less energy we need to import. And at the centralized network is generally more resilient than a centralized one, thinking on attacks or sabotage or cyber attacks and so on. However, we're also seeing emerging some inconvenience, such as a shortage of components and skills. In some countries, it's very difficult. You have a very long waiting list to get a professional, a qualified professional to do the installation for you. There's also administrative barriers, and there is also the investments that might be necessary, the grid, at different levels, depending on also for low voltage or high voltage, or different from geographical areas, depending to others, and also interconnection between countries. So again, it's not a silver bullet. Sorry, Alberto.
Could you please wrap up?
Yes. So pretty much this is it. This is all I wanted to mention and to discuss with you. And well, also was talking about the Repower EU, but I think Adela has already introduced that very well. So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, no, thank you very much, Javier, actually, for the very useful information on how important is prosumption at the moment in Europe, because clearly, it seems that it's still only a fraction of its potential, and then it comes the issue of the barriers, which actually probably the most important things to worry about and to try to deal. So that's thank you very much to Adela and Javier for the opening presentation. Now I turn to Ilaria to moderate the panel and the following up discussion. Ilaria.
Yes, many thanks, Alberto. I agree, very, very clear, both presentations. Thank you so much. We are now going to discuss with our panelists, which might take some inspiration from the previous presentations, but I'm also looking forward to their new input to the debate. I'm going to introduce them to you. We have Alessandro De Cristofaro, who is head of demand response and distributed energy at NLX, which we can consider the NL branch for electrification, but he will say more about that. We have Edwin Edelenbos from Netbeheer Netherlands, and we have Natalie McCoy, who's head of international affairs at ERSE, but today she's speaking as customers and retail markets working group co-chair for CEER, for the Council of European Energy Regulators. So thank you very much to all of you for being with us today. I know some of you have slides, and if technology assists us, I hope we will manage to remain in the 6 minutes that each of you has. We're starting with some delay, but I will give now the floor immediately to Alessandro for the first presentation.
First of all, thank you very much to everybody. It's a pleasure for me to stay with you and discuss about this debate, because it's very interesting and very actual themes that we have. I have prepared just a few slides in order to give you some snapshot, some nutshell regarding some point. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Just one second.
Well, no. Yep.
It is just a couple of slides, but putting some messages that are covered also from the other participants. So I'll go very quickly regarding the main topic. Just to give you a snapshot regarding Enel. Enel is a largest operator in for the network, with more or less 7 million of end user. We work around the world with also the installation of renewable. We manage more or less 50 gigawatt of RES capacity, and we also are largest player regarding retail for looking at the customer base with more or less 7 million of customers that we manage on a daily basis. We are also a leader in the demand response. That is another important topic for the energy transition. Anyway, in 2017, we launched this new project with this new company that has NLX, with the main ambition to support customers for more efficient and sustainable usage of the energy. Our first mission is assisting our customers in decarbonization, create value with innovative products and services. We operate around the world, and we operate mostly in 25 countries. Specifying the activities, we work with in partnership with our consumer in order to give them a different type of solution from energy point of view, collecting different pieces of the puzzle, as I like to say that, in order to provide them solution behind the meter, like photovoltaic or combined or not with energy storage. We also provide the solution for CHP, and we have also other solution that can help our client in reaching their goal for the decarbonization and efficiency. Coming back just to the Italy situation and looking at the prosumer, I got the opportunity to present you this snapshot from GSE, where by the end of 2020, the installation of photovoltaic system regarding the prosumer for household and also for business was more or less than 1 million of system connected to the buildings, with an installed capacity of 10,000 megawatt, and with a production estimate of more or less 5 terawatt hour per year. We have already discussed about on the main group of activity regarding the self-consumption. So coming to the presentation of Javier, I just synthesized that we can divide the self-consumption in two big groups from my perspective. One is the simple system of one consumer and producer, that is an individual household or a CNI customer that has installed PV panels, for example, on the rooftop with or not storage. All these type of system are regulated behind il testo integrato di sistemi semplici di produzione e consumo in Italy. And also we have the second group for a collective sharing of the energy that we can synthesize in a prosumer in one building, that is the collective, or a scheme for RECs, renewable energy community. All these type of scheme are synthesized in testo integrato di autoconsumo diffuso, TIAD, with the recent publication of the authority. When we talk about clearly RECs, we are talking about group association of consumer that join together in a legal entity to invest in renewable. They share the production for the consumption of the renewable. And when we talk about the shared energy, it's calculated on an hourly basis as the minimum of total energy produced by the renewable and the consumption of the total consumption of each members in that type of RECs. The ambitious in Italy, projecting the installation of PV plants for renewable community and self-consumption that is more or less 7.5 gigawatt by 2030, with steps of 1 gigawatt per year by 2026. So the renewable energy collective self-consumption will contribute around for 80% of the total PV by 2030, and will be the 51% of the new installation of PV distributed generation for the next years. Actually, we have a roadmap defined for the implementation of RECs. We are we are waiting for the other two steps that finally could complete the regulatory environmental for the renewable with the application of the minister and the definition of technical rule by GSC by the end of February. I tried to have final remarks regarding the situation in Italy, giving you just some snapshot regarding some nutshell regarding the regulatory messages in this table, where from an individual prosumer, from regulatory point of view, it's more or less everything well developed. From technical point of view, there are no particular issues regarding the installation of PV panels usually required for the householders and so on. From financial point of view, I'd like to say that the scheme are well supported from households in this moment. Additional measure maybe from business client could be useful in order to speed up also the installation of this type of solution. From the energy community point of view, so as I said before, we are waiting for other two steps that can complete the regulatory environmental in order to finalize and put in place the communities. From technical point of view, are defined the most KPI or topic in order to provide the type solution, but we are still waiting for other topic by GSC. And finally, from financial, the numbers that are running now in this moment as a preview, from our point of view, are quite sufficient in order to speed up also the process for the installation of RECs. So this is more or less the main messages that I would share with you. And thank you very much for the attention.
Many thanks to you, Alessandro. I found it extremely clear. Thanks for giving us this picture from Italy. We move now to the Netherlands, I would say, as there are some interesting experiences there as well when it comes to consumers. Edwin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ilaria, for the invitation to be part of this panel. My name is Edwin Edelenbos. I represent Netbeheer Nederland, which is the Dutch Association of Grid Operators. So I look at the topic from a grid perspective, and I won't use any slides. A lot has been shared already in this meeting. I agree, and I recognize most of the information. Nevertheless, I would like to bring in 3 additional questions, because I noticed that when I discussed this topic with questions, there are basically 3 concerns. And that is 1, if we are going to roll out self-consumption or energy sharing, will it have impact? Will it have a disturbance impact on the wholesale market? Will it have impact on the position of the suppliers? Will it have a negative impact on their balancing responsibility and keeping the entire system in balance? That are concerns that I notice that are still on the table when we discuss this. So I would like to focus on those concerns and those questions. And first, a definition distinguishment between collective self-consumption and energy sharing. For me, collective self-consumption means that you do not share energy on the wholesale market, but you use it within the 3 types that Adele described for yourself, in an apartment building, or in an energy community. So sharing of self-generated electricity in this model means that it's by definition balance neutral from an overall system perspective. Within a community, not more and not less electricity than the electricity that is generated is shared. So that also means that you do not need a balancing responsibility for that community. Now, does it have impact on the portfolio of the supplier? Yes, of course it does, but it's not different than when you turn off your light at home, or when you switch off your PV panels, or you start using your battery. It's exactly the same principle. Nevertheless, it means that we need to arrange something extra. And I think that it is a combination of both regulation, technical, and governance. What we need to make this going, of course, is that the DSO or TSO gives an ex post correction of the volume of the allocated energy by the community. So that means we need an IT platform. That means we need to provide information to the suppliers so that they are able to do their daily nomination in an accurate way. So the suppliers must be informed which of their customers are engaged in energy sharing and what their assets are. All this is necessary to make sure that this model of collective self-consumption is ready for large-scale rollout. And I think that when we organize this, that yes, the benefit will also be reduction of the grid load. I missed that benefit a little bit in poll number 2. And I know that Adele described it also as a risk that there might be a negative impact on the grid load. And yes, I see that risk too. But nevertheless, the overall promise of this approach is that it can actually reduce the task of grid investment, grid expansion for the grid operator. So this is, I think, collective self-consumption. So again, you create a sort of parallel universe that is not connected with wholesale markets. Now, of course, you can also connect with wholesale markets. That's what I call energy sharing. And the main difference between energy sharing and collective self-consumption is that in energy sharing, the energy community is part of the wholesale market and has a BRP responsibility. So that means you need a BRP license to act in that wholesale market. For reasons of time, I keep it limited to this, but I look forward to a discussion after all the panelists did their contribution.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Edwin, for being so clear. So I give the floor now to Natalie for the last intervention of this panel.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm not sure if it's the benefit of being last or the the downside of being last is that a lot of things have already been said. And I think very well said. In particular, Javier covered quite a lot of the issues around, the experience so far about self-consumption in communities and the practical aspects. Just to mention, as CER, we did a first review analysis of the kinds of issues that arise from the articles in the Clean Energy Package in this regard. And we published that back in June 2019. So you'd think it's a little bit out of date, but I think actually it's still quite relevant and timely because we did try to, in a way, I guess, identify, forecast, alert to the kinds of issues that are inherent in how you actually apply the principles that are, so to say, guaranteed, safeguarded, ensured via the EU legislation. And in that sense, maybe not because it's a scary, alarmist way, but if you allow me the analogy of an iceberg, we have, above the surface, the principles, the concepts, but below the surface, we really have all the practicalities, the conditions, and all the different aspects to make these things work. And it's a fact, as we see, depending on the type of self-consumption, collective sharing communities that we look at, which were mentioned by everybody, basically, the complexity changes, and it's an upward trend. So the more complex and the more functions or tasks or activities a community or group have, the more issues that they have to face and to put into practice. And this is the issue that we see, finding the balance between self-organization on the one hand and sophistication on the other. If you add storage, flexibility, all the different aspects, of course, that grows exponentially, I suppose you could say. So for us, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, depending on how much we want to do. The barriers are diverse. I very much agree that one of the main ones would be the administrative procedures, licensing, the delays of getting permission to do things. Again, pure self-consumers, I think that's a well-known practice now, and it's not necessarily so difficult. There are lots of even retail offers for renting or for contracting solar panels. But you see, it becomes a bit more complicated when you start doing things collectively or on a bigger scale, community or citywide. And that is something that we're seeing practical examples. Many still pilot projects, but we do see some practical examples. And so these kinds of issues go from, as I was saying, the licensing. Then, of course, if you become a supplier, if you have members and you're sharing the energy, or you're crossing the public grids, you have all the contractual relations between your own members and your consumers, as it were, or with the grid operators and the different actors along the supply chain. So that becomes another level of expertise that you need to have. Of course, if you are a supplier, all of the implications in terms of consumer rights, which have to be ensured. You have to, the billing, the contractual information, the contractual conditions, even labeling, labeling the source of your energy, for the most part, should be fairly simple, but you still have to do it. So all of these things mean that on the one hand, the initial concept is maybe, it's volunteer, it's non-professional, it's community, if you will, civilians based. But then if you want to do more and more things, it starts to get a bit professional and complicated very quickly. And so then you need help, and you need somebody to guide you and to maybe even represent you and to provide all of that support system that you need to make sure you're complying with all of these rules. So this goes back to the administrative complications, the regulatory obligations. But if we want people to have their rights and we want to make sure things work well for them, you can't necessarily have one without the other. So we can't have our cake and eat it too. If we want to do these things well, we do have to take on a level of responsibility and organization. So that is somewhat inevitable. Then, of course, if you use the public grid, we were talking about that, Edwin, it can bring the benefits, because it provides that flexibility, and people who are self-consuming are not necessarily putting more pressure on the grid, on the contrary. But, who's paying for it, the grid fees, making sure the system is sustainable for everybody for when we do need it, because it does happen. Those things also have to be factored in. And I think this is not a surprise. It's not an unknown issue, and there are solutions being rolled out, and it's very much if you will, on the regulators at national level in their responsibilities and in the implementation rules that they're putting into place. So these are the kinds of things that we see, and we become more and more aware of them. We alerted to some of them in our papers in 2019. Now we're seeing them coming out in practice and have questions about what to do concretely in the different cases that some of us have in our home countries. And there are solutions, there are things you can do to help, obviously simplifying admin procedures, doing as much as you can to standardize the criteria, or even provide help by standardizing contract templates for energy communities who are not equipped to have a dynamic legal team behind them to know all the minutiae and make sure that they comply with all the things. Of course, I think there was a question in the chat about digitalization. Digital tools are critical to all of this working. That goes without saying. But data protection, data access, cybersecurity is yet another level of complexity for a volunteer energy community. So these things also need to be made clear, but people need help, and they need to be brought alongside with it. As the projects get more complex, communities with schools and social housing and bigger scale, they will have different capacity or options in terms of how to react and prepare for all of these issues. But it's certainly true that not all the projects will be big, even those the bigger ones may have the most efficiencies, as we were also saying from the comments earlier. But I think this analogy, the iceberg, really is just a reminder to us that besides defining the big ideas, we then have to look below and how actually is it all going to work and put together, and not forget any of those aspects. And that's something that all of us, but also our member states and regulators, we all have to work on the different elements, I guess, which fall within our different levels of responsibility. And that's something that at CR we're also very, very concerned with. So just close there, but thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, Natalie, and thank you also to Edwin and Alessandro. I think you really managed to bring in very good input to the debate. I think we can take a look now to the polls to see if and how they changed in the response. But I will let Alberto guide you through this process, and then it would be great to have your comments also on the results of the polls overall.
Yep. So let's try to, thank you, Ilaria. Let's try to run the polls again and see if there is any major change. So I would ask Gazi to get the first poll out, and yeah, I guess it's coming. Exactly, and here we were looking at the role of self-consumption going forward in the context of the energy transition, with for possibility a game-changing role, an important role, one of many developments, or if you have no views. So let's see if things have changed since last time, since the beginning of the event. Yep. Let's see the results. Well, I guess it's very much still an issue of being an important aspect, but without not either being a game-changing or one of many. So it's not the only one, but it's definitely among the most important one. Then the second poll is about the benefits and of prosumption or self-consumption, and the idea, the choice here is between the environmental benefits, so greater penetration of renewable sources with limited impact on land use, enhanced security of supply, and possibly what Edwin was suggesting, the fact that you maybe save on distribution is here, reduce reliance on centralized generation, and therefore the need to use the grid to serve it and on energy imports. That's B. C is social benefit. This is probably more important for energy community and also a sense of participation by the residential sector. Financial benefits, lower bills, higher revenues. And finally, if you have no views, the option E is for you. I think this is very, very similar to what we had beforehand. I would say, with financial benefit just a notch above the environmental benefits. So I think the debate might have confirmed what participants thought already beforehand. And then we run the last one. Yes, indeed, this is about the barriers, and we have released a number of possible barriers to the development of self-consumption. Regulatory barriers as the first one, financial barriers, the need to have funds to make the upfront investment, technical barriers to do with infrastructure and capacity of meters, social barriers, and lack of knowledge and expertise, or if you have no other views, then your choice is F. I think, it's, I think the debate probably confirmed. Now, there may be a few percentage here and there, but, on the main, I think it's, it really confirms the, what participant thought at the beginning. So, okay, Ilaria, back to you for moderating, and then I guess after one round, then we may take some of the questions, and I would suggest that participants who wants to put questions, please use the Q&A facility rather than the chat. Ilaria.
Sure. So yes, I think the polls in the second round, they confirm more or less the initial views. The participants, there were just some little discrepancy, but really minor. So what is your views on these results? And I would start from Natalie this time.
Yes, well, I suppose it reflects the concern, I suppose, of how to make things work in practice, and the question of the complexity, the perceived and very real complexity of putting a community and collective self-consumption up and running. I think it also is interesting to see that also, the recognition that this isn't a silver bullet, which is exactly what Javier was saying earlier, that this is an important component, but one of many that we will need. And this is true for all of the policies and all of the discussions we're having about the energy transition. Every little bit is essential to delivering the whole. So I very much agree with the comments from our participants. I think we're like 80 something participants at some point in terms of the need to get this right, but to be aware that it's not the only thing that we have to do, and it's just one of several aspects of our energy system future. So I very much would concur with that view. I'm not sure. Yeah, I see the financial, not the financial, the regulatory barriers as an important one, but I think also knowledge, expertise. I think that really is a crucial part, which is, as you can imagine, linked to the regulatory one. Because if you don't understand, you know, all the rules and the system and the models and the administrative procedures, etc., then it does seem like a barrier, and it can be overwhelming. So I think the two go very much hand in hand, and the models can be, you know, completely valid and they can work. We have seen that, but it's understanding the energy profession and the system overall can be the challenge. And I mean, there's only so far you can go in simplifying. You have to be also aware that the system has to be safe and secure, and we can simplify as much as we can, but depending on what's happening in the, you know, the links to the grid and etc., you can't eliminate all things. There's a difference between, you know, facilitating and bypassing, and potentially putting things in danger by trying to be too quick and too simple. So I think there's a balance there as well.
Definitely, yes. Thank you very much, Natalie. Alessandro, together with your general comments, there was also a question for you in the chat, so I'll take this chance to, if you can also reflect on this, which has to do with Edwin's remark about definitions, no, about energy sharing versus self-consumption. But in Italy, I believe, it is more or less treated the same. So some participants asked if you could comment from an Italian perspective. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. If it's not a problem, I would like to start from the results of the question that we got with the pool,
please,
because it's very interesting from my perspective, the results that we took. I believe that for the first question regarding the rule for the energy transition of the self-consumption, I believe that we focalize the attention on the main topic. It's an important rule. So we have in front of us, I think, the most important opportunity that we take from the last 10 years in order to address in a different way the entire system of the energy, how we can got the benefit from these new rules. So giving the possibility to speed up with the application of the energy community, we are going in a correct way in order to address two main topics. That is the answer for the second question. The first one is to go with renewable distributed energy. That is the most important thing from my point of view as a democratic way to share the energy, and also from financial point of view, this is an opportunity in order to give the possibility to the end consumer to save the cost of energy, reaching the renewable energy that is at a lower cost respect to the other sources. Finally, I think that for the last topic, it's important to say that yes, the regulatory barriers today is the main topic that we have to take in our mind, because with a good regulatory framework, we are the possibility to develop everything like we have in our minds. But from the other point of view, I have to say that we have also a responsibility, like main operators, in order to talk with the authority and trying to address the key messages, trying to facilitate the way to put in place this type of solution. So it's correct to say that we have regulatory barriers, but as operator, as an end user, let me say, we have also the responsibility to talk with them in order to give them the possibility to understand a little bit more regarding the practical application of everything. Coming back to the question that we received from the participant, yes, the situation between collective and the energy shared by using the grid is the same. So I think that we got the point with a specific attention on that point. From my side, I have to say that when we look at the usage of grid with the energy communities, we have in front of us another big opportunities in order to understand how could be able to also develop new grids in a different way respect to what we did until now, taking into account that we'll have more distributed energy in our pocket.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Alessandro. And Edwin, now your turn.
Yeah, well, I fully agree with Alessandro's last remark, and that is the major trend is, of course, that we move from a centralized model to a more decentralized model. And that brings several topics on the table, including the topic that we are discussing today. But of course, it's not limited to that only. I heard somebody say that we need to correct incentives by DSOs to make sure that we give the right signals for grid load, for local balancing. Yes, we see that issue coming up with the increase of renewable penetration decentral that we have here in the Netherlands. And the question is, what is the willingness to move with all these different models? I see a lot of leadership at DJ Enner and the European Commission. And it looks like that my country at this moment is not able to transpose and implement what is needed regarding policies to create a liftoff for large-scale self-consumption and energy sharing. So maybe this is where my situation differs with other memberships. I see here a lot of attention for the question about the balancing responsibility of the energy suppliers and the impact on the wholesale markets. I also would like to say that I'm actually quite happy with the outcome of the poll, and that it is considered by most people as an important or even by some people even as a game-changing topic. So it has impact, and we have a lot of congestion at this moment in the Netherlands. Also in the DSO grids, we see that issue coming up because of higher penetration of electric vehicles, full electric heat pumps, and of course rooftop PV. So what we can keep local really helps the load on the grid, and therefore again the investment portfolio of the grid operators. So yeah, I'm very happy with this discussion. I think there are still some differences between member states, but I'm also very happy with the road the Commission is now exploring. I also see that in the energy market design paper, where it is clearly asked what does the grid operator need to speed up the energy transition. And I think this is definitely one of the tools that we need.
Very good. Many thanks. Many thanks for all your comments. I think I can now give the floor back to Alberto for the...
Yeah. Well, maybe also to hear about from so Javier and Adela, and I will start from Adela. Maybe I will pick up a few questions that I've seen in the Q&A. We won't be able to cover all of them, but I found a few of them quite interesting. The first one, if there are any targets defined for the involvement of youth in the energy communities, for involving the new generation. The second one is whether there are any kind of simplification regime for renewable energy communities are envisaged, also relating to the recently published guidance to member states related to the National Energy and Climate plans. And the third one, yes, about the facility that you, Adela, mentioned about for the communities, and when and how this will be set up, and who will be managing the facility, whether it would be Cine again or what. So Adela, if you could, I mean, you can talk about whatever you want, commenting the polls, maybe answering some of these questions.
Okay, thank you very much. It's certainly a fascinating topic, and still, sorry, I have still a lot to be discussed here. So we don't have any targets on youth. The Renewables Directive has a condition to involve, or encouragement to involve, energy poor and vulnerable explicitly. We don't have targets for youth. I think the concepts for energy communities are quite already quite you know, it's very regulated. The energy communities are very regulated. They have clear objectives, and they are very regulated entities. So I think adding additional targets and conditions would not make it easier for these entities to appear. But obviously it is a topic which I hope is appealing to the young people, because it's tech potentially, it's environment, it's you know, it's autonomy. It ticks all the boxes. So I hope that is appealing to young people, but I hope we don't need to change legislation for that. When it comes to the legal environment, and also picking up on what Edwin said, it's true that member states are a bit of laggards, and they have not implemented these provisions in the Electricity Directive, which is the responsibility of my unit. But I know that a similar situation appears also in the Renewables Directive. And this, of course, made the situation of consumers more difficult during the crisis. Yeah, if consumers had many more opportunities how to access renewables, they would have been shielded from high energy prices better than they were. And there are other provisions in the Electricity Directive that were not implemented. And again, consumers suffered more than they had to during the crisis. Yeah. So the first thing is to push member states to implement properly the legislation. The second thing is, and here I saw also Josh Roberts, who is part of the group here today. He's one of the people who are helping us map the environment in which energy communities currently operate, so that we see the barriers, we see what is actually happening at member states level. This is the repository project that we have now. So what we do currently is to map the barriers and map the real situation in member states, which will of course help us maybe to provide some guidance to member states, how to help with the implementation. And as part of this project, and then this rural energy communities project, we also provide a bit of technical assistance, yeah, but it is at small scale. So the idea with this facility, which would indeed be run by CINEA, the idea is to give a bit more money as well as technical assistance to scale it up. So the project we do now would be then scaled up as of next year with this facility. Yeah, and then maybe on a general comment from my side, I think indeed the future is very diverse. You know, we will have a lot of options. We will have suppliers, classic suppliers, innovative suppliers. We will have energy communities of different types, cooperatives, others. We will have active self-consumers, energy sharing of all sorts. So I think the future is diverse, and I think I know we spend a lot of time discussing the concepts, which is necessary, because of course, if people want to set an energy community, they need to understand the concept. But I think overall the future should be to make it as easy as possible for people to get engaged with green energy in different forms, whether they want to buy a green, they want to sign up to a green contract with a supplier, or whether they want to be part of an energy community, because they want more than just energy. They also want the community feel and being part of something, you know, grassroots movement, and they want to have something together with their neighbors, and they want to feel the community which comes with it, you know. Or some people want just to produce electricity themselves and share it with their neighbors. And I think we should enable all these opportunities so that everyone can choose and everyone can access renewables as in the way they want, and that is easy for them, because ultimately the objective is to get people off fossil fuels, and people of all income levels. That's important as well. We need to make this we need to get renewables to the low income people. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think we need to engage. I mean, the future will give a lot of opportunities to residential customers, and I think it's a matter. I mean, the track record of engaging residential customers is not the best one, and I think we need to scale up the effort. Javier, a reaction from your side on the results of the poll, or anything else that you've heard? And
Sure. Well, it was quite interesting to see the results of this poll. In particular, I like the question on what are the main barriers, and I very much agree with the results. That the first one was the regulatory and legislative barriers, but also the second most voted was on knowledge and skills. And here, drawing a bit on what Natalie said before, that we need to go simplifying, but there's a limit of how much you can simplify the regulatory and legal barriers for prosumers. But here, I think that's very important as well, the predictability. So kicking the can down the road, that's what some member states are doing. It doesn't help because even if they're a bit complex, the provisions, the certainty or the lack of certainty is what is delaying many of these changes, and what is making many of the actors nervous, from DSOs to consumers to people potentially willing to enter an energy community. If they don't know how the situation is going to evolve in the next years, they may be less likely to enter. And then on the second point as well, the knowledge sharing and the knowledge and the skills available as a barrier, I think this is also very important. I mentioned in my presentation the lack of qualified labor that is happening in many countries, and how this is something that is also addressed in the REPower EU, and I think it's only going to get more difficult. So this debate should also be extended to the educational system, and how vocational schools are designed and curriculum is designed, and it makes the skills of Europeans ready for the future. So these are like two impressions that I had. Well, and as well related to the knowledge and the skills, we need to make it easier for people in terms of understanding what it means starting an energy community and running it. Many of them are not professionals, so you also need to provide them with the knowledge that is needed. So yeah, this is just two impressions that caught my attention from the polls.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe one. We still have maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So a question to anyone who wants to answer from I think we need how can I say, we need a business model. We need an entity which is trusted by consumers. If we want to involve consumers at all levels, including those who are sort of energy poor, vulnerable, and engage them, then we probably need an actor that is trusted by them and can help them. And I think also maybe some of the energy communities, one of the barriers was exactly this about lack of knowledge, etc. Some of the energy communities may be quite competent. They may involve people at the local level who are into this, but otherwise some help is needed. Is the facility the Commission is trying to establish, or will establish, is it going to help in that dimension as well? Or should we have, if we have a target of having many communities around, should we identify sort of well-trusted entities I come to my mind, a consumers association, but I don't think they can fill this role at a very sort of decentralized level. Do you have anyone, any blueprint for what kind of entities could assist consumers, especially those who are less capable, less expert on this? Anybody from Commission, from the regulators, or for the companies? Because the companies can, but somehow they may not always be seen as the most trusted partner. Anyone? Just unmute and come in. Adela, you want?
Maybe I very briefly. one thing is how to explain people the opportunities linked to these concepts. And I think there are a number of possible sources. We have the energy agencies. We very often hear that disadvantaged people mostly trust those who they already know and with whom they are already in touch on other topics. So training of social workers on energy issues, for example, is one way forward. But very often municipalities are front runners in this area. And we have cases where municipalities, because also municipalities can identify people with financial difficulties, because normally a person with financial difficulties is not going to come with a label, I have financial difficulties. So it is for a municipality is often easier to identify these people and set up a project saying, if you come and show me your papers, you will have access to cheaper energy, which normally works because people trust authorities and they are ready to disclose this type of information to authorities. So very often municipalities run this type of energy communities, which are open to all income, and they are more advantageous for low income, for example.
Well, that's good input. Yes, Edwin?
Yeah, well, Alberto, I think your analysis is spot on. We do need a neutral party, neutral market facilitator, or neutral IT cloud service provider to make sure that many of these processes can actually be fully automated. And I think that also takes some pressure away from the governance and organization of the energy communities. Yeah, it's very nice when they start up that they have some professionalism to make sure that their long-term contracts are in place. But after that, a lot of the processes on a daily and even 15-minute basis can be fully automated, provided there is a neutral facilitator for that. That's my view on this.
Or a neutral advisor. That's what, I mean, we have experience in financial services where, there are financial services providers, but sometimes there are neutral or independent advisors for consumers. Any last comment from any of the participants? We are going to close in a minute or so. I see Natalie nodding, or Javier. Yeah. Whoever.
Alberto, if I can.
Alessandro, you go first.
Yes. Just a few words regarding I totally agree on the fact that it's important to have a neutral advisor in order to facilitate also the increasing of knowledge, from the perspective of the final user. But when I look at to the energy community, I look at the end user, So also, I think that from my perspective, also the company has to play a very important role in order to be transparent versus the end user, and trying to facilitate their involving and their participation, give them different type of solution or possibility of offers, easier as much as possible in the definition of this proposal for the end user. So this role of the company could contribute also in increasing and speed up the process to implement the regs from my point.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Alessandro. I think we now get to the closing. I think it has been quite an interesting debate. I think we sort of agreed with the response from the audience on the polls, and I think we also identified the challenges of setting up the large number of energy communities and self-consumption opportunities that we need for the energy transition beyond the large scale renewable installations. So thanks a lot to everybody. Thanks to Adela, thanks to Javier, thanks to Alessandro, to Edwin, to Natalie. I think that's it for today. Well, thanks to Ilaria to be with me.
Pleasure.
With us today.
Thanks to the participants. Very interesting input also via the chat. Many references. So thanks a lot.
Thank you to the participant. Thank you to Gazi behind the scenes. And Ilaria, the next one, let's announce it.
The next one, you got me unprepared. It will be next
on the 8th of March.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yes, 8th of March. So a very important date, and we will try to do our best to celebrate. So don't miss it. We will send more information very soon. We are finalizing the program, but